good evening, and welcome to Bedtime Sleep Story. Tonight, let us settle in together and drift slowly across the vast and ancient land of China through 10,000 years of quiet history beneath a soft evening sky. We will wander along the Great Wall as it winds over misty mountains, through the silent golden halls of the Forbidden City, past terraced rice fields glowing in the dusk, and gardens where water lilies float on still ponds. We will see silk being spun, tea being poured, paper lanterns lit, and dragons dancing softly through the old stories. This is a land of emperors and poets, of patient farmers and clever inventors, a civilization so old and so deep that its memory seems to drift like mist over the rivers and mountains. There's nothing here to hurry for. The old emperors sleep in their tombs, the lanterns are being lit along the river, and we are only quiet visitors, wandering through at evening as the day grows still. If these gentle journeys help you rest, a soft like or a follow lets other tired minds find this peaceful place too. But for now, there's nothing you need to do. Loosen your shoulders, let your eyes grow heavy, and let the cares of the day drift away like mist over a quiet river. And as the last light fades over the mountains, let us begin. China is home to one of the oldest unbroken civilizations on Earth. Among all the civilizations of the world, that of China is one of the very oldest and the most continuous, with a culture, a written language, and a way of life that have flowed on, changing yet always connected for thousands upon thousands of years. While other ancient empires rose and fell and were forgotten, China's long story has run on, like a great river that never stops. To imagine that immense span of time, the same land farmed and the same characters written, and the same festivals kept across so many thousands of years, generation after generation, handing the culture gently onward without a break, is to feel the deep and patient continuity of China. A civilization so old that within it whole ages and dynasties rise and pass like seasons, while the great river of its life flows quietly on and on. Chinese history is told as a long succession of ruling families called dynasties. The story of ancient China is usually told as a series of great ruling families, the dynasties, each of which governed the land for a time, often for centuries, before giving way to the next in a long, slow rhythm of rise and flourishing and gentle decline. The names of these dynasties mark the chapters of China's history. To imagine that long procession of dynasties, each one rising to order and beauty, ruling over its golden age and then softening and passing to make way for the next, the whole history of China told as a series of these great family ages, following one another down the centuries like the turning of the seasons, is to picture the calm shape of Chinese time, an unhurried succession of ages, each leaving behind its poems and palaces and wisdom for the ones that followed. The Chinese believed their emperors ruled with the blessing of heaven itself. In old China, the emperor was held to rule not by mere power, but by what was called the blessing of heaven, a kind of sacred approval given to a just ruler, which could be lost if he governed badly. A good and wise emperor kept this blessing. A cruel or failing one might lose it, and so lose his right to rule. To imagine the emperor seen as the link between heaven and the world, ruling so long as he governed with justice and care, bound by the belief that his very right to the throne depended on his goodness, is to picture a deep and gentle idea at the heart of the Chinese kingship, that power was a trust granted from above, and held only so long as it was used well, and that even the mightiest ruler answered, in the end, to heaven. The emperor was known by a beautiful title, the Son of Heaven. So sacred was the emperor's role that he was given the title of the Son of Heaven, the one chosen to stand between the divine order above and the world of people below, responsible for keeping harmony between them through his just rule and his careful performance of ancient ceremonies. He was the still center of the whole vast realm. To imagine the emperor in this role, the Son of Heaven, performing the solemn rites that were thought to keep the world in balance, his every act weighted with the duty of holding harmony between heaven and earth, living at the quiet center of an immense and ordered realm, is to picture the deep seriousness with which the Chinese viewed their ruler, not merely as a king, but as a sacred keeper of the harmony of the whole world, the human hinge between the heavens and the patient earth. The Great Wall of China is among the most astonishing things ever built by human hands. Across the northern edge of China winds the Great Wall, an immense barrier of stone and earth built and rebuilt over many centuries to guard the land stretching for thousands of miles across mountains, deserts, and grasslands. One of the largest things ever made by people. It rises and falls with the land like a great stone dragon. To imagine the Great Wall winding endlessly over misty green mountains, climbing the steepest ridges and dropping into the valleys, its watchtowers standing at intervals along its length, the whole vast structure flowing across the land as far as the eye can see and far beyond, is to picture one of the supreme works of human patience and labor. A wall so long and so old that it seems less a building than a feature of the earth itself, sleeping across the mountains of the north. The Great Wall was not built all at once, but joined together over many ages. The Great Wall, as we know it, was not raised in a single effort, but grew over many centuries, as different rulers built their own walls, and later ages joined, repaired, and extended them into the great connected barrier we picture today. It is really many walls, the work of many ages, woven into one. To imagine the wall growing slowly over the centuries, each age adding its own stretches and towers, repairing what time had worn away, the separate walls of many dynasties gradually linked and rebuilt into the single great structure that winds across the north, is to feel how the wall, like China itself, was the patient work of age upon age, no single ruler's monument, but the gathered labor of a whole civilization across the centuries, raised stone by stone and joined at last into one. For all its length, the Great Wall could never have been seen from the moon. Despite a popular belief, the Great Wall cannot truly be seen from the moon, or even easily from low above the earth. For although it is enormously long, it is quite narrow and blends into the colors of the land around it. The famous claim, though charming, is a gentle myth. To imagine the truth of it, the wall winding for thousands of miles, yet only a few paces wide, far too slender a thread to be picked out from the great distances of space, blending quietly into the mountains and earth it is made from, is to be reminded how legends grow up around great things, and how the real wall, marvelous as it is a thing of the earth and the mountains, best seen not from the heavens, but by walking its long stone length beneath the open sky. At the heart of old China stood a vast and secret palace, the Forbidden City. In the great northern capital stood the Forbidden City, an immense palace of golden-roofed halls, red walls, and the quiet courtyards, the home of the emperors in the very heart of the realm, so called because ordinary people were forbidden to enter it. For centuries it was the most secret and splendid place in all of China. To imagine the Forbidden City at dusk, its sweeping golden roofs glowing in the last light, its endless red-walled courtyards growing quiet, the great empty halls where the emperor once held court settling into shadow, The whole vast palace, hushed within its high walls, is to picture the magnificent, mysterious center of the old Chinese world. A city within a city, forbidden and golden, where the Son of Heaven lived at the still heart of his immense realm, hidden from all but a chosen few. The Forbidden City holds nearly 1,000 buildings within its red walls. The Forbidden City is not a single palace, but a vast complex of nearly 1,000 buildings, halls, gardens, and courtyards spread over a great enclosed space. A whole city of golden roofs and red walls, where thousands of people once lived and worked in the service of the emperor. One could wander it for days. To imagine that immense palace city, hall after golden roofed hall, opening onto courtyard after quiet courtyard, gardens and gates and chambers without number, the whole vast enclosure once humming with the life of the court, and now standing splendid and still, is to picture the staggering scale on which the emperors of China built, raising not merely a palace, but an entire hidden city, a world unto itself behind high red walls, golden and secret at the center of the great capital. The roofs of the imperial palaces glowed with golden yellow tiles, a color for the emperor alone. The sweeping roofs of the Forbidden City were covered in glazed tiles of a brilliant golden yellow, a color reserved for the emperor alone, so that the imperial buildings glowed like gold beneath the sun, while all others used humbler colors. The yellow roofs marked the dwelling of the Son of Heaven. To imagine those golden roofs catching the morning light, a sea of glowing yellow tiles sweeping in graceful curves above the red walls, the color of the emperor shining out over the whole capital, forbidden to any other, is to picture how deeply the old Chinese world was ordered by such signs, how even a color could belong to the emperor alone, so that the very roofs of his palace proclaimed his sacred place at the summit of all things, glowing gold above the great city like a piece of captured sunlight. Beneath the earth near an ancient capital sleeps a vast army made of clay. Buried near the tomb of China's first great unifying emperor lies one of the wonders of the world, an enormous army of life-size soldiers, horses, and chariots, all made of fired clay, set in long ranks underground to guard the emperor in death. There are thousands of these silent warriors, and no two faces are quite alike. To imagine that great clay army standing in its long buried ranks, thousands of soldiers with individual faces gazing quietly into the dark, horses and chariots ready, the whole vast host arrayed underground for over 2,000 years to guard a sleeping emperor, is to picture one of the most astonishing and peaceful sights in all the world. A silent army of clay keeping its long, patient watch in the earth, each face a small portrait, waiting through the centuries in the dark. Each clay soldier of the buried army has a face all its own. The most remarkable thing about the Great Buried Army is that the thousands of clay soldiers are not identical, but each has its own individual face, with different features, expressions, and hairstyles, as though everyone were modeled on a real person, giving the whole silent host a strangely living quality. To imagine walking among those ranks and seeing that every single face is different, this one stern, that one young, another thoughtful, thousands of distinct clay faces gazing quietly ahead, each made with such care that it seems almost a portrait of a real soldier long ago, is to feel the astonishing patience and artistry behind this buried wonder, and to sense in those many individual faces a quiet humanity, as if the sculptors wished each clay soldier to be not just a copy, but a person, standing watch forever in the dark. The buried army was once painted in bright colors, now mostly faded. When the great clay army was first made, the soldiers were not the plain gray we see today, but were painted in bright and varied colors, their armor, faces, and clothing vivid with reds, greens, blues, and purples, though most of this color faded soon after they were uncovered and met the air. To imagine that silent army as it first stood 2,000 years ago, every soldier brightly painted, the long ranks a blaze of color in the lamplight of the tomb, a vast host not gray, but vivid and lifelike, is to picture the buried wonder as its makers truly meant it, and to feel a gentle wistfulness for all the color the centuries have softened away. The bright paint that once made the clay army seem almost alive, now mostly returned to the quiet gray of the patient earth. Silk was China's great secret and its gift to the world. China was the birthplace of silk, the shimmering thread spun from the cocoons of a small moth's caterpillar fed on mulberry leaves. And for thousands of years, China alone knew the secret of its making, weaving it into cloth so fine and lovely that it was prized across the whole world. Silk was China's treasure and its mystery. To imagine the quiet groves of mulberry trees and the patient work of raising the silkworms and unwinding their fine, shimmering thread, the secret kept carefully for ages while the beautiful cloth traveled out to dazzle distant lands, is to picture one of China's greatest gifts to the world, a thread of such softness and beauty that it gave its name to the great roads of trade, carried from the quiet Chinese countryside to the courts and markets of the whole earth. The making of silk begins with a small caterpillar and a mulberry leaf. The whole shimmering world of silk begins with a humble creature, the silkworm, the caterpillar of a certain moth, which feeds only on the leaves of the mulberry tree and, when ready, spins around itself a cocoon of a single long, fine thread, which can be carefully unwound to make silk. From this small, patient creature comes all the world's silk. To imagine the silkworms quietly feeding on heaps of fresh mulberry leaves and then spinning their pale cocoons, each one a tiny ball of the finest thread, gathered and gently unwound by patient hands to be woven into shimmering cloth, is to feel the gentle wonder at the heart of silk, that something so lovely and so prized across the whole world should begin with nothing more than a small caterpillar and the leaves of a tree, transformed by patience into beauty. China gave the world the gift of paper. Among China's greatest gifts to the world was the invention of paper, a smooth, light, cheap material to write upon, made by pressing and drying a pulp of plant fibers, which replaced the heavier and costlier things people had written on before, and spread slowly across the whole world to transform learning everywhere. To imagine the quiet workshops where paper was first made, the plant fibers pounded to a pulp and spread thin and pressed and dried into smooth, pale sheets, the precious new material that would carry the written word more easily than ever before, spreading out at last from China to change how the whole world kept its knowledge, is to picture one of the most quietly powerful inventions in all of history, born in China and given gently to the world, a simple sheet of paper that would carry upon it in time very nearly all that humankind would think and write. China invented printing long before the rest of the world. Long before printing was known elsewhere, the Chinese were already printing, first by carving whole pages onto wooden blocks and pressing them onto paper, and later with movable pieces of type, so that books and images could be made in many copies. The oldest printed book we know of comes from China. To imagine those early printers carefully carving a whole page of characters in reverse onto a smooth wooden block, inking it, and pressing sheet after sheet of paper upon it to make many copies of a book or a sacred image. The written word multiplied as never before is to picture how China, with paper and printing both, laid the quiet foundations of the spread of knowledge centuries before the rest of the world, patiently carving and pressing the way toward a future in which books would no longer be rare and precious, but many. The compass, which would guide ships across the world, was a Chinese invention. The Chinese discovered that a piece of magnetized iron or a needle will always turn to point in the same direction, and from this they made the compass, a device for finding one's way, which they used first for ordering buildings and rituals, and later for guiding ships, and which spread in time across the world to make great sea voyages possible. To imagine those early Chinese compasses, a magnetized needle floating or balanced so that it always swung to point the same way, a small, trembling guide to direction that would one day carry sailors across uncharted oceans far from China, is to picture another of China's quiet gifts to the world. The simple, profound discovery that the earth itself could point the way. A discovery that would, in time, unlock the seas and let humankind find its way across the whole face of the globe. Gunpowder, too, was first discovered in China in the search for long life. In one of history's gentle ironies, gunpowder was discovered in China by people who were not seeking a weapon at all, but were searching for a medicine to give long life, and stumbled instead upon a powder that burned and banged. At first, it was used mostly for fireworks and celebration. To imagine those early seekers mixing their powders in search of a potion for long life, and finding instead this strange, crackling, flaring substance, used first not for war, but for the bright fountains and bursts of fireworks that delighted festivals, is to picture how some of the world's most powerful discoveries arrived almost by accident, and to remember that gunpowder, before it was ever a weapon, was in China first of all a thing of light and color and celebration, scattering its bright sparks across the night skies of festivals. The night skies of Chinese festivals were the birthplace of fireworks. From the discovery of gunpowder came fireworks, which the Chinese made and loved long before the rest of the world, filling the night skies of their festivals with bursts of light, color, and cheerful noise to celebrate the new year and other happy occasions and to drive away bad luck. To imagine a Chinese festival night long ago, the dark sky suddenly blooming with showers of colored sparks and bright flowers of fire, the crowds below looking up in delight, the bangs and crackles echoing over the rooftops as the fireworks chase away the shadows and welcome in good fortune, is to picture one of China's brightest and most joyful gifts to the world. The turning of a chance discovery into pure celebration. The night sky itself made into a garden of light to mark the happiest moments of the year. China is the homeland of tea, the world's most beloved gentle drink. China is where tea began, the soothing drink brewed from the leaves of a certain evergreen plant, which the Chinese have enjoyed for thousands of years and which spread slowly across the whole world to become, after water, the most widely drunk thing on earth. In China, tea is woven deep into daily life and into a quiet art of its own. To imagine the misty green hillsides where the tea bushes grow in neat rows, the careful picking of the tender leaves, and the gentle ritual of brewing and pouring and sipping the fragrant drink, a small daily ceremony of calm repeated for thousands of years, is to picture one of China's gentlest gifts to the world. A simple cup of warm, fragrant tea that has soothed and refreshed and quietly gladdened more people across more centuries than almost anything else the world has known. An old legend says tea was discovered when a leaf drifted into an emperor's cup. A charming old story tells that tea was discovered long ago when a few leaves from a wild tea plant drifted by chance into a pot of water that an ancient emperor was boiling, giving it a pleasant fragrance and flavor, and so revealing the gentle drink to the world. Whether or not it happened so, the tale is a lovely one. To imagine that legendary moment, the emperor resting in the shade as his water boils, a few green leaves drifting down on the breeze into his pot, the water turning fragrant and golden, the first cup of tea, quietly born by happy accident, is to picture the gentle way the Chinese imagined the beginning of their beloved drink. Not invented in toil, but discovered as a quiet gift of nature. A few wild leaves and a pot of water, meeting by chance to give the world its most soothing cup. The Chinese built a canal so long it joined the two great rivers of the land. Among the great works of ancient China was an immense canal, dug over many years, that linked the country's two greatest rivers and ran for over 1,000 miles, allowing boats to carry grain and goods between the north and the south of the vast land. It is among the longest and oldest canals in the world. To imagine that great canal winding for over 1,000 miles across the country, boats laden with grain and goods gliding quietly along it between the two mighty rivers, joining the distant north and south of China into one connected whole, the patient labor of countless workers flowing on as a great waterway, is to picture the astonishing scale of Chinese engineering, a man-made river, longer than many natural ones, dug by hand to stitch the huge land together and carry the life of the country gently back and forth. The Chinese have written with the same kind of characters for thousands of years. The Chinese way of writing, in which each character stands for a word or idea rather than a sound, is one of the oldest writing systems still in use. And modern Chinese characters descend in an unbroken line from forms used thousands of years ago, so that the written language has bound the vast country together across time and distance. To imagine that long, unbroken thread of writing, the same kind of characters brushed and carved across thousands of years, linking the people of one age to those of another and the people of one distant region to those of another who might speak quite differently, yet read the same script, is to picture one of the deep secrets of China's long unity. A written language so enduring that it has carried the thoughts and poems and records of the civilization onward, unbroken, across an immense span of time. The earliest Chinese writing was carved on bones and shells to ask questions of the future. The oldest Chinese writing we know was carved onto the bones of animals and the shells of turtles, used in ancient times to seek answers about the future, for the bones were heated until they cracked, and the cracks were read as messages, with the questions and answers carved beside them. These oracle bones are the ancestors of all later Chinese writing. To imagine those ancient diviners carving their questions onto bone and shell, heating them in the fire until they cracked, and reading the future in the lines, the very first Chinese characters set down beside the cracks, is to picture the deep and mysterious beginnings of Chinese writing, born not as a tool of trade or record, but as a way of speaking with the unseen. The first characters scratched onto bone in the hope of glimpsing what was to come. The dragon of China is not a fearsome beast, but a gentle bringer of rain and good fortune. In China, the dragon is quite unlike the fierce, fire-breathing dragons of Western tales, for the Chinese dragon is a benevolent, graceful creature, long and serpentine, associated with water, rain, rivers, and good fortune, a bringer of blessings rather than a monster to be feared. It is one of the most beloved symbols of China. To imagine the Chinese dragon as the people pictured it, a long, sinuous, scaled creature flowing through clouds and water like a living river, gentle and wise and powerful, bringing the rains that nourish the fields and the good fortune that blesses the year, is to picture how differently China saw this great mythical beast, not as a danger to be slain, but as a kindly spirit of water and sky, woven with affection into festivals and art, and the very symbol of the emperor himself. The dragon was the special symbol of the emperor himself. So noble was the dragon in China that it became the very symbol of the emperor, whose throne was called the dragon throne, and whose robes were embroidered with dragons, a five-clawed dragon being reserved for the emperor alone as a sign of his supreme place. The dragon and the emperor were bound together as images of power and blessing. To imagine the emperor seated upon his dragon throne in robes embroidered with golden dragons twining through clouds, the great benevolent beast serving as the very emblem of his sacred rule, the five-clawed dragon belonging to him alone in all the realm, is to picture how the Chinese joined their ruler to their most beloved mythical creature, so that the emperor became, in a sense, the dragon among people, the bringer of order and blessing, his throne and his robes alive with the graceful, blessing-bearing beast. The phoenix was the gentle companion to the dragon, the symbol of the empress. Beside the dragon in Chinese symbol and story stood the phoenix, a beautiful mythical bird that stood for grace, virtue, and renewal, and was the special symbol of the empress, so that dragon and phoenix together represented the emperor and empress and the harmony of their union. The phoenix was a creature of beauty and good omen. To imagine the phoenix as the Chinese pictured it, a magnificent bird of flowing, brilliant feathers, graceful and gentle, a symbol of beauty and of happy renewal, paired with the dragon as the empress is paired with the emperor. The two great creatures together standing for balance and harmony is to picture the lovely symmetry of Chinese symbolism, in which the powerful dragon and the beautiful phoenix together express the union of opposites into harmony, the deep ideal at the heart of so much Chinese thought. The Chinese saw the whole world as a balance of two gentle opposite forces. At the heart of Chinese thought lay the idea that all things arise from the interplay of two opposite but complementary forces, often pictured as dark and light, soft and hard, still and moving, which together make up the harmony of the world, each needing the other and flowing into the other in endless balance. Neither could exist without its partner. To imagine that gentle idea, the whole world seen as a dance of opposites that are not enemies but partners, dark and light, rest and motion, each flowing into the other and held forever in balance. The famous circle of curving halves in which each side carries a seed of the other is to picture one of the deepest and most peaceful ideas of Chinese wisdom, that the world is made not of warring forces, but of complementary ones, forever turning gently into one another in a great and harmonious balance. A wise teacher called Confucius gave China much of its gentle wisdom. Long ago, there lived a teacher named Confucius, whose calm and practical wisdom about how people should live, treat one another, and order their families and society shaped Chinese thought and life for thousands of years afterward. He taught respect, kindness, learning, and proper conduct, and his sayings were treasured and learned by heart. To imagine Confucius as a quiet, thoughtful teacher walking among his students long ago, offering gentle, practical wisdom about how to be a good person, how to honor one's parents and treat others with kindness and respect. His calm sayings, remembered and cherished and woven into the very fabric of Chinese life for age after age, is to picture the deep influence of a single wise and gentle voice, whose patient teachings about how to live well guided one of the world's great civilizations for thousands of years. Confucius taught above all the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. At the heart of the teachings of Confucius was a gentle and simple idea that one should treat others as one would wish to be treated, with kindness, honesty, and respect, and that society would be harmonious if everyone behaved well in their place and cared properly for one another. It was a wisdom of gentleness and good order. To imagine that quiet teaching spreading through China and down the centuries, the simple, deep idea that we should treat others as we would wish to be treated, that kindness and respect and honest dealing are the roots of a peaceful society, guiding the conduct of countless people across thousands of years, is to picture the gentle heart of Confucian wisdom, a teaching not of grand mysteries, but of how to live kindly and well with one another, as enduring and as needed today as it was so long ago. Another great Chinese sage taught the way of gentleness and going with the flow of nature. Alongside Confucius, China honored another kind of wisdom, taught by a sage who spoke of following the natural way of things, of gentleness, simplicity, and not forcing, comparing the wise life to water, which is soft and yielding, yet wears away the hardest stone and always finds its path. This gentle philosophy prized harmony with nature. To imagine that quiet teaching, the wisdom of yielding and flowing like water, of finding strength and softness and peace and not striving against the natural order, of living simply and in harmony with the great way of nature, is to picture another deep current in Chinese thought, a gentle counterpart to the careful order of Confucius, teaching that there is a deep and effortless wisdom in softness, in patience, in flowing like water around obstacles rather than battering against them, and so finding one's natural and peaceful way. The Chinese honored their ancestors with deep love and respect. A central part of Chinese life was the honoring of ancestors, the parents and grandparents and forebears who had gone before, who were remembered with love and respect, offered small ceremonies, and felt to be still part of the family, watching over their descendants. The bond between the living and their ancestors was deep and tender. To imagine a Chinese family keeping the memory of their ancestors warm, offering small, respectful ceremonies, feeling that those who had gone before were not truly gone, but remained part of the family, gently watching over the generations that followed, is to picture one of the deepest and most tender threads of Chinese life. The unbroken bond between the living and the dead, the loving respect for those who came before, which wove each family together across the generations into one long, continuous line of care, reaching back through time. Jade was treasured in China above gold for its quiet beauty and meaning. To the Chinese, the smooth, lovely stone called jade was more precious than gold, prized for thousands of years for its beauty, its coolness, and its supposed virtues, and carved into ornaments, ritual objects, and treasures of great value and deep meaning. Jade stood for purity, virtue, and quiet strength. To imagine the Chinese love of jade, the cool, smooth green and white stone, carved by patient hands into objects of marvelous delicacy and meaning, treasured above gold for its gentle beauty and the virtues it was thought to embody, kept and handed down as the most precious of possessions, is to picture how the Chinese found the highest value not in a flashing gold, but in a stone of quiet, restful beauty, prizing jade as the very emblem of the calm, pure, enduring qualities they most admired. The Chinese created the art of beautiful writing called calligraphy. In China, writing was not only a way of recording words, but a high and revered art, for the brushed characters made with ink and brush could be formed with such grace, balance, and expressive beauty that fine calligraphy was treasured as much as painting, and a person's handwriting was thought to reveal their very character. To imagine a Chinese scholar at work with brush and ink, drawing the characters with flowing, practiced strokes, each one balanced and alive, the beauty of the writing is treasured as the meaning of the words. The whole art, a quiet meditation in black ink on white paper, is to picture how the Chinese raised even writing itself into a fine art, finding in the simple act of forming characters with a brush a discipline of beauty and a window into the soul, so that to write well was to make something as lovely as any painting. Chinese painters loved most of all to paint mountains, rivers, and mist. The painters of China were especially drawn to the beauty of nature, and above all, to landscapes of mountains, rivers, waterfalls, and drifting mist, which they painted in ink with great delicacy, leaving much of the paper empty to suggest cloud and space and the vastness of the natural world. These paintings breathe a deep calm. To imagine one of these landscape paintings, a few misty mountains rising out of empty white paper, a thread of waterfall, a tiny figure crossing a bridge, much of the picture left as soft blank space to suggest cloud and distance and silence, is to picture the deep, restful spirit of Chinese painting, which sought not to fill the eye but to quiet it, finding in mountains and mist and empty space a profound peace, and inviting the viewer to wander gently into a serene world of water and stone and soft drifting cloud. The Chinese made the finest porcelain in the world, so fine it was called China. China gave its very name to porcelain. The smooth, hard, beautiful white pottery that Chinese potters perfected long before anyone else, especially the lovely blue and white ware that was treasured across the whole world and copied never quite perfectly by potters in distant lands. Fine Chinese porcelain was a marvel and a treasure. To imagine the Chinese kilns producing their exquisite porcelain, the smooth white clay fired to a hard, translucent perfection, and painted with delicate blue designs of flowers, dragons, and landscapes, the finished bowls and vases so beautiful that they were carried across the world and prized in distant palaces, is to picture one of China's greatest crafts, a pottery so fine and so admired that its very name in many lands became simply China, the word for the country and the word for the beautiful ware, forever joined. A great fleet once sailed from China far across the oceans in ships larger than any other. Long before the famous voyages of European explorers, China sent out enormous fleets of great ships that sailed across the seas to distant lands, carrying treasures and bringing back wonders, in vessels far larger than any others of their age, commanded by a famous admiral. These voyages reached far across the oceans. To imagine those vast Chinese treasure ships setting out across the open sea, towering vessels far larger than the ships of any other land, sailing to distant coasts, to trade, and to display the glory of China. Bringing home strange animals and rare goods from far away is to picture a remarkable chapter of Chinese history when the greatest fleet in the world sailed out from China across the oceans, reaching distant shores in ships of a size the rest of the world would not match for centuries. That great fleet even brought a giraffe home to the emperor's court. Among the wonders brought back by China's great ocean fleet from distant lands was a giraffe, a tall and gentle creature never before seen in China, which caused great marvel at the imperial court, where some thought it might be a kind of legendary auspicious beast come to bless the reign. To imagine that astonishing moment, a living giraffe led into the Chinese court, its long neck towering over the marveling officials, brought across the oceans from a far distant land to stand, gentle and strange, before the emperor, taken by some as a sign of heaven's favor, is to picture the wonder of those great voyages, which reached so far that they could bring home a creature out of legend, a tall, mild, spotted animal from the other side of the world, to amaze the court and seem, to the people of China, like a living blessing from the edge of the earth. The Chinese loved gardens and made them as small, perfect worlds of peace. The Chinese created some of the most beautiful gardens in the world, designed not as orderly rows, but as small, perfect landscapes of winding paths, ponds, rocks, bridges, and pavilions, meant to seem like miniature versions of wild nature, and to be wandered through slowly as places of rest, reflection, and quiet delight. Each garden was a small world of peace. To imagine a classical Chinese garden, its winding paths leading past still ponds full of goldfish and water lilies, over little arched bridges, around strangely beautiful rocks, and through moon-shaped gates. Every view composed like a painting. The whole a small, perfect world made for quiet wandering is to picture the deep Chinese love of gardens, places made not to impress but to soothe, where a person might walk slowly among water and stone and flower and find, within high walls in the middle of a busy city, a small and perfect peace. Strangely shaped rocks were treasured in Chinese gardens like works of art. In Chinese gardens, certain strangely shaped, weathered rocks, full of holes and curving lines, were treasured as works of art and given places of honor, prized for their resemblance to mountains, clouds, or fantastic shapes, and admired for the way nature itself had carved them over long ages. A fine garden rock could be a treasure. To imagine one of these treasured rocks standing in a quiet garden, a tall, weathered stone full of holes and twisting hollows, shaped by water and time into something like a tiny mountain or a frozen cloud, set up and admired as a great work of natural art, is to picture the refined and gentle taste of the Chinese garden, which found beauty not only in flowers and water, but in the strange, patient sculpture of a single rock, honoring the slow artistry of nature itself, and inviting the wanderer to pause and wonder at a stone. The Chinese hung paper lanterns to light their festivals with a soft, warm glow. The Chinese have long made and loved lanterns, especially those of paper and silk, stretched over light frames, which they hang out in great numbers to celebrate festivals, filling streets, gardens, and rivers with a soft, warm, colorful glow on festival nights. A whole festival is given over to them. To imagine a Chinese festival of lanterns, hundreds of glowing paper lanterns of every color and shape hung along the streets and in the gardens and set floating on the rivers, their soft, warm light filling the night, families wandering beneath them in the gentle glow, is to picture one of the loveliest of Chinese traditions. the turning of the dark festival night into a world of soft, drifting light. The warm glow of paper lanterns floating like gentle stars brought down to earth, lighting the celebrations with a quiet and peaceful radiance. At the Great Spring Festival, families gather and the whole land celebrates the new year. The most important festival in China is the celebration of the new year in early spring, a time when families gather from near and far. Houses are cleaned and decorated, special foods are shared, and the whole land celebrates with feasting, fireworks, and red decorations for good fortune over many days. It is a time of homecoming and renewal. To imagine that great festival, families traveling long distances to gather together, homes hung with red decorations for luck, tables laden with special foods, the streets bright with lanterns and loud with fireworks, the whole vast country pausing to welcome the new year in warmth and togetherness, is to picture the deep importance of family and renewal in Chinese life. The yearly drawing together of scattered families into the warmth of home, the universal pause to share food and hope and welcome the fresh new year together. The color red has long meant good fortune and joy in China. In China, the color red is the color of good fortune, joy, and celebration. Used at the New Year, at weddings, and at all happy occasions, in decorations, clothing, and gifts, to bring luck and to drive away misfortune. To see red is to feel the presence of celebration and good wishes. To imagine the warmth of red through Chinese life, the red decorations and lanterns of the new year, the red of a bride's wedding dress, the little red envelopes of money given as gifts, the color of joy and fortune appearing wherever there is celebration and good wishing, is to picture how deeply color carries meaning in China, where red is not merely a color, but a warm wish for happiness and luck, brightening every joyful occasion with its glow and carrying wherever it appears the warm hope of good fortune and gladness. Children and elders alike receive small red envelopes of money for luck. A beloved custom of the Chinese New Year and other happy times is the giving of small red envelopes containing money, given especially to children and to the unmarried by their elders, as a gift of good fortune and a wish for happiness and prosperity in the year to come. The little red packets are a warm and cheerful tradition. To imagine the giving of these red envelopes, children receiving them with delight from their parents and grandparents at the new year, the small red packets carrying not only a little money, but a warm wish for luck and happiness, a gesture of love and good fortune passed from the old to the young, is to picture one of the gentle, joyful customs that warm Chinese family life. The simple, happy ritual of the red envelope, a small, bright token of an elder's love and hope for the young one's good fortune. The Chinese measured the year by the moon, and so their festivals follow it. Traditional China followed a calendar based on the cycles of the moon as well as the sun, so that the new year and many festivals fall on different days each year, tied to the phases of the moon, and the full moon in particular was a time of special beauty and celebration. The moon was woven into the rhythm of the year. To imagine life lived by the gentle rhythm of the moon, the festivals shifting with its phases, the new year tied to a certain new moon of spring, the great mid-autumn festival kept beneath the brightest full moon of the year, the whole calendar turning with the soft monthly waxing and waning of the moon, is to picture how closely the Chinese once lived to the rhythms of the sky, ordering their year and their celebrations by the patient turning of the moon, and so keeping their festivals always in step with the quiet light of the heavens. Under the bright autumn moon, families gather to share round moon cakes. One of China's most beloved festivals comes in autumn. beneath the brightest and roundest full moon of the year. When families gather to admire the moon, light lanterns, and share special round pastries called moon cakes. The roundness of moon and cake standing for wholeness and the gathering together of the family. It is a gentle festival of togetherness. To imagine that mid-autumn evening, families gathered outdoors to gaze up at the great round full moon glowing in the clear autumn sky. Lanterns lit, round moon cakes shared among them, the fullness of the moon mirrored in the fullness of the family gathered together is to picture one of the tenderest of Chinese festivals, a quiet celebration of wholeness and reunion beneath the bright autumn moon, when the simple sight of the full moon and the sharing of a round cake become a gentle expression of the love that draws a family together. The Chinese told a tender story of a lady who lives upon the moon. The Chinese have long told a gentle, wistful story of a beautiful lady who came to live upon the moon, where she dwells with a jade rabbit, and who is honored especially at the Mid-Autumn Festival, when people gaze up at the full moon and remember her. It is one of the loveliest and most tender of Chinese tales. To imagine that gentle story, the Lady of the Moon living far above in her cool palace with her jade rabbit companion, gazed up at with affection by the people below. On the bright autumn night, the great full moon become not just a light in the sky, but the home of a tender legend, is to picture how the Chinese filled even the moon with gentle story and feeling, so that to look up at the full moon was to remember a wistful tale, and the cold distant light became warm with the presence of a beloved legend. The Chinese loved the panda, the gentle bear that eats only bamboo. China is the home of the giant panda, the beloved black and white bear that lives in the misty bamboo forests of the mountains and feeds almost entirely on bamboo, spending its quiet days gently munching among the green stalks. Calm, round, and peaceable, it is one of the gentlest and most beloved of all animals. To imagine a giant panda in its misty mountain home, sitting peacefully among the tall green bamboo, slowly and contentedly munching the stalks with its round paws, utterly calm and harmless in the soft mountain mist, is to picture one of the gentlest creatures in all the world. A great round bear that wishes only to sit quietly and eat its bamboo in peace, beloved across China and the whole world for its calm, its roundness, and its perfect peaceable contentment among the green bamboo of the quiet mountains. The Chinese gave the world many small comforts, like the folding umbrella and the wheelbarrow. Among China's many gifts to the world were countless useful inventions, both great and small, including the folding umbrella to keep off rain and sun, the wheelbarrow to ease a heavy load, the kite to delight the children, and many another clever, helpful thing that spread out from China to make daily life easier everywhere. To imagine all these humble, useful inventions born in China and spreading quietly across the world, the umbrella unfurled against the rain, the wheelbarrow easing a worker's burden, the bright kite climbing into the wind, each one a small gift of cleverness and care, is to picture how much of the ordinary comfort of daily life around the world began in China. The patient ingenuity of its people, scattering useful little inventions across the whole earth, easing the work and brightening the days of people who never knew where these gentle gifts had come from. The Chinese invented the kite and flew it for joy and for use. The kite was invented in China long ago and was used not only for the simple delight of flying it, but for signaling, for measuring distances, and for other practical purposes. Before spreading across the world as one of childhood's purest joys. A kite climbing into the wind is a sight that gladdens every heart. To imagine the first kites rising into the Chinese sky, made of light bamboo and silk or paper, climbing and dancing on the wind, used at first perhaps for sending signals or measuring the air, but loved above all for the simple joy of watching them fly, is to picture another of China's gentle gifts. The kite that lifts so easily into the wind and tugs so happily at its string, a small bright thing of bamboo and paper that has brought delight to children and to the grown across the whole world and down the centuries. The Chinese kept goldfish as treasured ornamental pets, bred for their beauty. The Chinese were the first to keep goldfish, breeding the ordinary carp over many generations into the beautiful golden, orange, and white ornamental fish we know today, kept in ponds and bowls for their gentle beauty and the calm pleasure of watching them drift. From China, the goldfish spread across the world. To imagine those first goldfish gliding in a quiet Chinese garden pond, bred patiently over generations from plain carp into shimmering ornaments of gold and orange and white, kept simply for the gentle pleasure of watching them drift and turn among the water lilies, is to picture the refined and peaceful Chinese love of beauty, which found delight even in patiently shaping a humble fish into a thing of grace and gave the world the goldfish, that small bright ornament of ponds and bowls, drifting calmly through the water to soothe the watching eye. Acupuncture and herbal medicine are part of China's ancient healing arts. China developed its own deep and ancient traditions of medicine, including the use of fine needles placed at certain points of the body, and a vast knowledge of healing herbs and gentle treatments, all based on the idea of keeping the body's energies in harmony and balance. These healing arts are thousands of years old. To imagine the patient gathering of healing herbs and the careful old arts of Chinese medicine, the placing of fine needles to ease pain and restore balance, the deep belief that health is a matter of harmony within the body, the gentle remedies built up over thousands of years of careful observation, is to picture another of China's ancient achievements, a whole tradition of healing rooted in the idea of balance and harmony, seeking always to restore the body's natural order gently with herbs and needles and care, rather than to battle against it. The Chinese measured even the trembling of the distant earth with a clever machine. Long ago, a Chinese inventor made a remarkable device to detect distant earthquakes. A beautiful bronze vessel with dragons around its rim, each holding a ball, so that when the earth trembled far away, a ball would drop from the dragon facing the direction of the shaking, showing where the distant earthquake had struck. To imagine that elegant ancient machine, a great bronze jar ringed with finely cast dragons, each holding a bronze ball in its mouth, standing quietly until a far-off earthquake, too distant to be felt, set one ball dropping with a chime into a waiting frog below, pointing toward the trouble, is to picture the remarkable ingenuity of ancient China, which could sense the faint trembling of the earth from far away and show its direction with a device as beautiful as it was clever. Dragons in bronze enlisted to listen for the quiet shudders of the distant ground. The Chinese were keen watchers of the stars, keeping records for thousands of years. The Chinese were among the world's most patient and careful watchers of the night sky, keeping detailed records of the stars, the planets, comets, and other sky events for thousands of years. Records so careful that they are still useful to astronomers today. They watched and wrote down the heavens with great devotion. To imagine those ancient Chinese astronomers, night after night observing the sky, carefully noting the movements of the planets, the appearance of comets, the slow turning of the stars, keeping their patient records across the centuries, building up a treasury of observations so faithful that it still helps astronomers now, is to picture the deep Chinese love of patient watching and recording, the long, devoted attention paid to the night sky across thousands of years, gathering the quiet motions of the heavens into careful records that have carried the memory of the ancient skies down to our own time. The Chinese named the years after 12 different animals in a turning cycle. In the Chinese way of reckoning, each year is named after one of 12 animals, which follow one another in a repeating cycle, so that a person is said to be born in the year of a certain animal, thought to share something of its nature. The cycle of 12 animals turns gently on and on. To imagine that turning cycle of years, each one belonging to its animal, the rat, the ox, the tiger, and the rest, following one another round and round through time. Each person carrying through life the sign of the animal of their birth year, the whole calendar made into a gentle round of creatures, is to picture a warm and homely way of marking time, in which the years are not cold numbers, but friendly animals, each returning in its turn, so that to ask someone's age is to ask their animal, and time itself turns in a circle of familiar creatures. An old legend tells how the animals race to decide the order of the years. A charming legend explains the order of the 12-year animals as the result of a great race, in which the animals competed to cross a river, the clever rat riding on the ox and leaping ahead to finish first, the others following in the order they arrived, and so the years were named. It is a delightful story told to children. To imagine that legendary race, all the animals struggling to cross the wide river, the small clever rat hitching a ride on the kindly ox and then springing off at the last moment to win, the others arriving one by one to take their places in the order of the years, is to picture the gentle, playful imagination of Chinese tradition, which explained the solemn order of the calendar with a charming animal race, turning the reckoning of years into a beloved story full of cleverness and good humor, told and retold to delighted children. The Chinese loved the lotus flower, which rises pure and lovely from the mud. Among the most beloved flowers in China is the lotus, which grows in ponds and rises on a tall stem to open its beautiful blossom clean and pure above the muddy water from which it springs, and which the Chinese cherished as a symbol of purity and goodness, rising untouched from a difficult world. To imagine a still Chinese pond covered with the broad green leaves and pink and white blossoms of the lotus, each lovely flower lifted clean and pure above the dark water and mud from which it grew, opening serenely to the morning light, is to picture one of the gentlest and most meaningful of Chinese flowers, beloved not only for its beauty, but for its quiet lesson that something pure and lovely can rise untouched from the muddiest beginnings, blooming serene and perfect above the troubles from which it came. The Chinese garden often had a round moon gate, a doorway shaped like the full moon. In Chinese gardens, one often finds a beautiful round doorway in a wall, shaped like the full moon, called a moon gate, through which one passes from one part of the garden to another, the perfect circle framing the view beyond like a living painting. The moon gate is one of the loveliest features of the Chinese garden. To imagine passing through a moon gate in a quiet garden, the perfect circle of the doorway framing a view of pond and rock and willow beyond, the round opening like the full moon brought down into the wall, each step through it revealing a new composed and lovely scene, is to picture the refined gentleness of Chinese garden design, which turned even a doorway into a thing of beauty. The round moon gate inviting the wanderer onward through a series of framed and perfect views, each one a small painting glimpsed through a circle of moonlight and stone. The Chinese made beautiful folding fans, both useful and lovely. The Chinese made and loved fans, especially the folding fan, which could be opened with a graceful sweep to cool the air and closed neatly away, and which was often painted with delicate scenes or written with poetry, so that a fan was both a useful thing and a small work of art carried in the hand. To imagine a Chinese folding fan opened with a graceful gesture on a warm day, its silk or paper leaf painted with a delicate landscape or brushed with a line of poetry, stirring the air gently and then folding neatly closed, a thing at once practical and beautiful held lightly in the hand, is to picture the Chinese gift for making even the smallest everyday objects lovely, turning a simple fan into a tiny painting or poem, so that to cool oneself on a summer day was also to hold and admire a small, graceful work of art. The Chinese practiced gentle exercises of slow, flowing movement for health and calm. In China, there grew up gentle arts of slow, flowing movement and breathing, practiced for health, balance, and peace of mind, in which a person moves slowly and gracefully through a series of poses, calming the mind and strengthening the body in a kind of moving meditation. These gentle exercises are still loved today. To imagine people practicing these slow, flowing movements in a quiet garden or park at dawn, moving gracefully and unhurriedly through the gentle poses, their breathing slow and even, their minds growing calm and clear with each soft, deliberate motion, is to picture one of the gentlest of Chinese traditions, a way of caring for body and mind together through slow and peaceful movement, finding in the unhurried flow of the exercises a deep calm and balance, a quiet daily meditation made of gentle motion beneath the morning sky. The Chinese drank their tea with a gentle ceremony, an art of calm and care. In China, the drinking of tea grew into a gentle art and ceremony in which the water, the leaves, the pot, and the cups are all chosen and used with care, and the brewing and pouring and sipping become a quiet ritual of attention and calm, a small moment of peace in the day. The tea ceremony is a meditation in hospitality. To imagine such a tea ceremony, the careful heating of the water and warming of the little pot, the gentle pouring of the fragrant tea into small cups, the unhurried sipping and quiet appreciation, the whole simple act, turned into a ritual of calm attention and gracious welcome, is to picture the deep Chinese gift for finding peace and beauty in ordinary things, raising even the daily drinking of tea into a gentle ceremony, a small island of quiet care and hospitality in the middle of the busy day. Silk, paper, tea, and porcelain were China's great gifts that travel the world. If we gather up the gentlest of China's gifts to the world, we find silk and paper, tea and porcelain, four lovely and useful things that began in China and spread across the whole earth, softening and beautifying and easing life wherever they went, carried out along the great roads of trade. Each one changed the world in its quiet way. To imagine these four gentle gifts traveling out from China across the world, the shimmering silk and the smooth paper, the soothing tea and the beautiful porcelain, each one born in China and carried to the far corners of the earth to clothe, to teach, to comfort, and to delight people who had never seen the land they came from, is to picture how much of the world's quiet beauty and comfort flowed outward from this single ancient civilization, scattering its gentle gifts gently across the whole of humankind. The Chinese built tall, graceful towers called pagodas, rising in tiers toward the sky. Across China rose the graceful towers called pagodas, tall structures built in many stories, each with its own upturned roof, often raised at temples or beautiful spots, rising in elegant tiers toward the sky as places of worship, memory, or simply of beauty in the landscape. The pagoda is one of the loveliest shapes of Chinese building. To imagine a pagoda rising against the evening sky, its many tiers stepping gracefully upward, each with its gently upturned roof, standing tall and serene above a temple garden or upon a green hill, its elegant shape a familiar and beloved sight in the Chinese landscape, is to picture the quiet beauty of Chinese architecture, which raised these graceful many-storied towers as gentle landmarks across the land. Their upturned roofs and rising tiers lending a note of calm elegance to hilltop and temple and the soft evening sky. The upturned roofs of Chinese buildings were both beautiful and full of meaning. A distinctive feature of Chinese buildings is the graceful upturned curve of their roofs, with the eaves sweeping gently upward at the corners, a shape both beautiful and, it was thought, helpful in warding off bad influences and lifting the spirit. These curving roofs give Chinese architecture its gentle, soaring grace. To imagine the roof lines of a Chinese palace or temple, the great tiled roofs sweeping down and then curving gracefully upward at their corners, the upturned eaves lending the heavy buildings a strange lightness, as if they might lift into the air. The lovely curve repeated across courtyard and hall is to picture the gentle elegance of Chinese building, which softened the weight of its roofs with that graceful upward sweep, so that even the grandest halls seemed poised lightly upon the earth, their curving eaves lifting the eye and the spirit toward the sky. The Chinese honored scholars above soldiers and learning above force. In old China, the highest respect was given not to warriors, but to scholars, learned men who had studied deeply and passed difficult examinations, and who governed the country as officials, so that learning and wisdom, rather than fighting, were the path to honor and high position. China prized the pen above the sword. To imagine a society in which the most honored people were not the strongest fighters, but the most learned scholars who rose to govern the land through years of patient study and difficult examinations, in which a poor but clever boy might rise high through learning alone, and wisdom was prized above force, is to picture one of the deep and gentle values of Chinese civilization, its profound respect for learning, which made the studious scholar, not the warrior, the model of success, and set the quiet pursuit of knowledge at the very summit of what a life might achieve. To become an official, one had to pass long and difficult examinations. For many centuries, the way to become a government official in China was to pass a series of extremely difficult examinations, testing one's deep knowledge of the classics, poetry, and wise conduct, so that officials were chosen, at least in principle, for their learning and ability rather than their birth. The examinations shaped Chinese society for ages. To imagine the candidates for these great examinations, having studied for years, sitting in small cells for days at a time to write their essays and poems, the whole future of a family resting on a young scholar's learning, the path to high office open in principle to any who could master the difficult tests, is to picture a remarkable idea at the heart of old China, that the rulers should be chosen for their learning and wisdom, tested by examination, so that the pen and the patient years of study, more than noble birth, opened the way to honor. The first emperor to unite China gave the country much of its lasting shape. Long ago, a powerful ruler first united the many warring states of China into a single empire, standardizing the writing, the money, the measurements, and the roads, and beginning the Great Wall, so giving the vast country much of the lasting shape and unity it would keep for thousands of years afterward. He was the first to rule all of China as one. To imagine that first unifier, bringing the many separate states together into a single great realm, decreeing one system of writing and one money, and one set of measures for all, joining the walls of the north and building roads across the land, laying down the very framework of a unified China that would endure for millennia, is to picture a moment of immense consequence, the welding of many lands into one great civilization, whose unity, once made, would flow on through all the long ages that followed. The Chinese were the first to use paper money, long before the rest of the world. The Chinese were the first people in the world to use paper money, printed notes that stood in place of heavy coins, an invention that astonished travelers from distant lands, where wealth still meant metal carried in purses. The idea of money as a printed promise on paper began in China. To imagine the markets of old China, where people paid for goods with light printed notes instead of heavy strings of coins, the convenience and the strangeness of money made of paper, the idea, marvelous to outsiders, that a printed slip could carry real value, is to picture yet another of China's quiet inventions that would in time spread across the whole world, the humble but profound notion of paper money, born in China centuries before any other land, lightening the purses and easing the trade of a great civilization long before the rest of the world caught up. The Chinese loved peonies, the lush flowers they called the king of blooms. Among the most beloved of Chinese flowers was the peony, a lush, full, gloriously colored bloom that the Chinese honored as the king of flowers, a symbol of beauty, wealth, and honor, cherished in gardens and painted and celebrated in poetry. The peony was the very emblem of flourishing beauty. To imagine the peonies of a Chinese garden in their full late spring bloom, their great lush blossoms heavy with petals of deep pink and red and white, glorious and abundant, honored as the king of all flowers, and celebrated as a sign of beauty and good fortune, is a picture the Chinese delight in rich and lovely things. Their love for this most full and splendid of blooms, which they crowned the king of flowers and cherished as the very image of beauty in its fullest, most abundant, most flourishing form. The Chinese kept crickets as tiny musical pets, prized for their song. A charming old Chinese custom was the keeping of crickets as small pets, prized for their cheerful, chirping song, kept in little cages and cherished for the gentle music they made, especially welcome in the quiet of the home. The song of a cricket was treasured like a tiny melody. To imagine a Chinese household keeping a cricket in a small, finely made cage, the little creature chirping its cheerful song through the quiet evening, its gentle music a small companion in the home, cherished and cared for as a tiny living instrument, is to picture the refined and gentle pleasures of old China, where even the song of a small cricket was treasured, kept and enjoyed for the simple, soothing music it made, a tiny voice of summer carried into the house, filling the quiet hours with its small, contented, chirping melody. The Chinese love the bamboo, which bends in the wind but does not break. The Chinese held the bamboo in special affection, admiring the way it grows tall and green and yet bends gracefully in the strongest wind without breaking. And so, they made it a symbol of the wise and good person, who is strong yet flexible, upright yet yielding. Bamboo was beloved in gardens, in art, and in poetry. To imagine a grove of green bamboo bending and swaying in the wind, its tall, slender stalks bowing gracefully before the gusts, and then springing upright again, never breaking. The whole grove rustling softly, is to picture one of the most beloved of Chinese plants and one of its gentlest lessons that true strength lies not in rigid hardness, but in the supple grace that bends before the storm and rises again. So that the Chinese loved the bamboo as a quiet teacher of resilience. Upright and green and unbroken, the Chinese carved beautiful seals to stamp their names in red ink. In China, instead of signing with a pen, people often marked their documents, paintings, and letters with a personal seal, a small carved stamp, usually of stone, that printed their name or a chosen phrase in red ink, so that a red seal mark stood as a signature and a sign of ownership or approval. These seals were carved with great artistry. To imagine a Chinese scholar pressing his personal seal in bright red ink onto the corner of a painting or a letter, the small carved stone leaving its elegant red mark as a signature, the seal itself a finely carved little treasure, is to picture another of the refined customs of old China, the marking of one's work and one's words, not with a scrawled signature, but with a beautiful carved seal stamped in red. A small, bright emblem of identity, pressed with care, that signed and graced a painting or a page. The Chinese loved poetry above almost all the arts, and their poets are beloved still. The Chinese loved poetry deeply, and some of their greatest poets, who wrote long ago of nature, friendship, wine, the moon, and the passing of time, are beloved to this day. Their verses learned by heart and treasured across the centuries, poetry was woven into the very heart of Chinese culture. To imagine the great poets of old China composing their verses, writing with delicate feeling of moonlit nights and distant friends, of mountains and rivers and the gentle sadness of time passing, their poems treasured and memorized and loved for more than 1,000 years, is to picture the deep place of poetry in Chinese life, an art so cherished that its finest practitioners are remembered and loved like dear companions across the centuries. Their quiet, beautiful verses about the moon and the mountains and the human heart still speaking gently to readers 1,000 years on. A famous poet wrote so tenderly of the moon that his verses are loved to this day. Among the most beloved of all Chinese poets was one who wrote with special tenderness of the moon, of wine, and of friendship. His graceful verses, often composed beneath the moonlight, treasured and recited for over 1,000 years, and known to nearly every Chinese person. His love of the moon shines through his poems still. To imagine that poet long ago, sitting out beneath the bright moon with a cup of wine, composing verses of such grace and feeling about the moonlight and the longing for distant friends, that they would be loved and learned by heart for more than 1,000 years, his quiet words still recited softly today, is to picture the enduring power of gentle poetry and to feel how a few beautiful lines written beneath the moon one night long ago could become a treasure shared by a whole people across the centuries. The Chinese believed deeply in harmony, balance, and the middle way. Running through all of Chinese thought and life was a deep love of harmony and balance, a belief that the best path was usually the middle way between extremes, avoiding excess, keeping things in proportion, and seeking always to bring people, nature, and the forces of the world into peaceful balance. Harmony was the great ideal. To imagine this gentle ideal at the heart of Chinese civilization, the constant seeking after balance and harmony in all things, in the home and the state and the natural world, the preference for the moderate middle way over harsh extremes, the deep wish to bring all things into peaceful proportion, is to picture the calm and gentle spirit at the core of Chinese culture, which prized above almost all things the quiet achievement of harmony, the bringing of opposing forces and competing claims gently into balance, so that the whole might rest in peace. The Chinese honored old age and the wisdom of the elderly. In China, old age was honored rather than hidden away, and the elderly were treated with deep respect, their experience and wisdom valued, their counsel sought, and their care taken as a sacred family duty, so that to grow old was to grow in honor. Respect for elders was among the deepest of Chinese values. To imagine a society in which the old were not pushed aside but honored, in which gray hair was a mark of respect, and the wisdom of the elderly was sought and treasured, in which caring for one's aging parents was held to be among the highest of duties, is to picture one of the most tender and admirable values of Chinese life. Its deep respect for age and its loving care for the old. A culture that saw in the elderly not a burden, but a treasure of wisdom and experience, to be honored and cherished to the end. The Chinese filled their art with hidden meanings and gentle good wishes. Much of Chinese art is full of hidden meanings and gentle good wishes. For many objects, animals, and plants stood for particular blessings, so that a painting of certain flowers or fruits or creatures was really a quiet wish for long life, happiness, many children, or good fortune. Chinese art speaks a gentle language of blessings. To imagine the hidden good wishes woven through Chinese art, a painting of a certain fruit wishing the viewer many descendants, a pair of certain birds wishing a happy marriage, a particular flower wishing long life and honor, the whole of art become a gentle language of blessing and good wishes, is to picture the warmth and kindness folded into Chinese decoration, in which a picture was rarely just a picture, but nearly always carried, quietly, a warm wish for the happiness, prosperity, and long life of the one who received or beheld it. The peach was a symbol of long life and grew in the gardens of immortals. In Chinese symbol and story, the peach was a special fruit, standing for long life and even immortality, and legend told of magical peaches that grew in the garden of an immortal queen and ripened only once in thousands of years, granting endless life to those who ate them. The peach was the very emblem of long life. To imagine those legendary peaches of immortality, ripening in the heavenly garden of the immortal queen, once in a great age, golden and fragrant, granting endless life to the fortunate few who tasted them, and the ordinary peach below cherished as a symbol of long life and given as a gentle wish for many years, is to picture how the Chinese wove their hopes for long life into a simple, beautiful fruit, so that the peach became a tender emblem of the wish that those we love might live long and happily for many, many years. The Chinese loved music and made instruments of silk strings and bamboo. Music was deeply woven into Chinese life, and the Chinese made many beautiful instruments, including stringed instruments strung with silk and flutes made of bamboo, whose gentle, refined sounds were played in courts, gardens, and homes, and were thought to soothe the heart and bring harmony. The making of music was a cultivated and gentle art. To imagine the gentle music of old China, the soft notes of a silk-stringed instrument plucked in a quiet garden, the breathy song of a bamboo flute, the refined and peaceful melodies played to soothe the heart and bring the spirit into harmony, is to picture another of the calm pleasures of Chinese life, a music made not to excite, but to soothe, drawn from silk and bamboo, and played gently in the cool of a garden or the quiet of a home, filling the air with peaceful, harmonious sound. The Chinese gave great care to the harmony of their buildings with the land. The Chinese believed that buildings, towns, and graves should be placed in harmony with the natural flow of the land, the hills, the water, and the unseen energies of a place. And they gave careful thought to choosing and arranging sites so that they would bring good fortune and rest in harmony with nature. This was a gentle art of placement. To imagine the care with which the Chinese chose and arranged the sites of their homes and temples and gardens, seeking to set them in harmony with the hills and the flow of water and the quiet energies of the land, so that a house might rest peacefully in its setting and draw good fortune from its surroundings, is to picture the deep Chinese wish to live in harmony with nature rather than against it, arranging even their buildings so as to flow gently with the land, and to rest, like everything they made, in peaceful balance with the world. The Chinese love the chrysanthemum, the flower of autumn and long life. Among the flowers most beloved in China was the chrysanthemum, which blooms in autumn when other flowers have faded, and which the Chinese cherished as a symbol of long life, endurance, and quiet nobility, celebrating it in gardens, in art, and in poetry. The chrysanthemum was the gentle glory of the autumn garden. To imagine the chrysanthemums blooming in a Chinese garden in the cool of autumn, their many-petaled blossoms of gold and white and bronze, opening bravely when other flowers have gone, cherished as a symbol of long life and quiet endurance, celebrated by poets and painters as the noble flower of the dying year, is to picture the Chinese love for this brave autumn bloom, which they honored not least because it flowered late and faithfully in the cooling year, a gentle emblem of endurance and long life, blooming on serenely into the quiet of autumn. The Chinese told that all the world's people were once made from clay. Among the gentle old stories of China was one that told how a kindly goddess, lonely in the early world, made the first people out of yellow clay from the riverbank, shaping them with her hands and giving them life, so peopling the empty world with beings to keep her company. It is one of the tenderest of creation stories. To imagine that gentle tale, the lonely goddess by the river at the beginning of the world, scooping up the soft yellow clay and shaping it lovingly into little figures, breathing life into them so that they rose up living to keep her company. The whole human race, born from a goddess's wish not to be alone, is to picture the warmth and tenderness of Chinese myth, which imagined the beginning of humankind not as a cold accident, but as the loving work of a gentle goddess, shaping the first people from river clay out of a simple wish for company. The Chinese honored the ox and the water buffalo for their patient work in the fields. The Chinese held a deep affection and respect for the ox and the water buffalo, the patient, gentle beasts that pulled the plows and worked the flooded rice fields for thousands of years, providing the labor on which the whole farming life of the country depended. These calm animals were honored as faithful helpers. To imagine a water buffalo standing patiently in a flooded rice field at dusk, having pulled the plow through the soft mud all day, its gentle calm a familiar and beloved sight in the Chinese countryside, the faithful beast that made the growing of rice possible across the vast land, is to picture the quiet gratitude the Chinese felt for these patient working animals, the calm oxen and buffalo whose steady labor in the fields fed the whole civilization, honored and cherished as the gentle, tireless partners of the farmer through thousands of years of patient work. Rice was the gentle grain at the heart of life across much of China. For much of China, especially the warm and watery south, rice was a staple food and the very heart of farming life. Grown in flooded fields called paddies, planted and tended and harvested by patient hand labor, and forming the basis of nearly every meal. The growing of rice shaped the landscape and the life of the people. To imagine the rice fields of southern China, the flooded paddies stepping in green terraces up the hillsides, mirrored with sky, the farmers waiting to plant and tend the young green shoots by hand, the whole gentle landscape shaped by the patient growing of rice is to picture the quiet foundation of life across much of China, the humble grain that fed the millions. Grown with such patient care in the watery fields, the green terraces and flooded paddies, among the most peaceful and beautiful of all the sights of the Chinese countryside. The Chinese terraced whole hillsides into steppes to grow their rice. To grow rice on steep and hilly land, the Chinese patiently carved the hillsides into countless level steps or terraces, each one a flat field that could be flooded and planted, so that whole mountainsides became great green staircases of rice, shaped by the patient labor of many generations. These rice terraces are among the most beautiful landscapes in the world. To imagine those terraced hillsides, the mountainsides carved into thousands of curving level steps, each one a flooded green field mirroring the sky, the whole slope become a vast and gentle staircase of rice, climbing toward the clouds, shaped by the patient hands of generation after generation, is to picture one of the loveliest works of human patience in all the world. Whole mountains gently sculpted into rice terraces, the labor of ages turned into landscapes of such beauty that they seem less like farms than like the quiet artwork of a whole people. The Chinese made beautiful things of lacquer, building them up in many thin layers. The Chinese perfected the art of lacquer, a hard, smooth, glossy coating made from the sap of a certain tree, built up in many thin layers over wood or other materials, and often carved or painted to make beautiful boxes, furniture, and ornaments of great richness and durability. Lacquer work was a patient and exquisite craft. To imagine the making of fine Chinese lacquer, layer upon thin layer of the precious sap, brushed on and dried and polished over many patient weeks, built up at last into a deep, glossy, jewel-like surface, then carved or painted with delicate designs, is to picture the patience and refinement of Chinese craft, which could take the humble sap of a tree and, through dozens of careful layers and long labor, transform it into objects of deep, glowing beauty, smooth and rich and lasting. The patient work of weeks folded into a single gleaming lacquered box. The Chinese honored the crane as a symbol of long life and graceful old age. The Chinese held the crane, the tall and elegant bird, in special honor as a symbol of long life and graceful old age, and it appears often in their art and poetry. Standing serene in marsh and garden, a creature of dignity and peace. The crane was a gentle emblem of a long and graceful life. To imagine the crane as the Chinese loved it, a tall, white, elegant bird standing serenely on one leg in a quiet marsh or garden, the very picture of dignity and calm, cherished as a symbol of long life and honored old age, painted and celebrated for its grace, is to picture the Chinese love for this most elegant of birds, which they made an emblem of the long and graceful life they wished for those they loved. So that to paint a crane was to offer a gentle wish for many serene and dignified years. The Chinese loved the willow tree, which trails its branches gently by the water. Among the trees most beloved in China was the willow, with its long, slender branches trailing gracefully down toward the water. A tree associated with springtime, with gentleness, and with the tender sadness of farewell, often planted by ponds and rivers and celebrated in poetry. The willow was a tree of gentle feeling. To imagine a willow tree by a still Chinese pond, its long green branches trailing down to brush the water's surface, swaying softly in the spring breeze, its gentle drooping form mirrored in the quiet pond below, beloved by poets as an image of tenderness and parting, is to picture the soft and feeling heart of Chinese nature love, which cherished the willow for its very gentleness, its graceful trailing branches, and its air of tender melancholy, making it a beloved companion of ponds and rivers and a gentle presence in countless poems and paintings. The Chinese marked the seasons with great care, dividing the year into many small parts. The Chinese watched the turning of the year with great care, dividing it not only into 4 seasons, but into many smaller periods, marking the subtle changes of weather, the times for planting and harvest, and the small turning points of nature, so that the year was followed in fine and gentle detail. They lived in close attention to the seasons. To imagine the Chinese year divided into its many small seasons, each marking some quiet change in the weather or the work of the fields, the coming of the first rains, the awakening of the insects, the ripening of the grain, the whole year followed in gentle, careful detail by people who lived close to the land, is to picture the deep attentiveness of the Chinese to the rhythms of nature, watching the year turn through its many small and subtle seasons, and ordering their planting and their lives by the quiet, gradual changing of the natural world. The Chinese loved miniature trees, grown small and shaped with patient care. The Chinese developed the gentle art of growing miniature trees in shallow pots, shaping and pruning them with patient care over many years, so that they became tiny, perfect versions of great old trees, living works of art that captured the beauty of nature in miniature. A single small tree might be tended for generations. To imagine one of these miniature trees, a tiny gnarled pine or maple grown in a shallow dish, shaped and tended with infinite patience over many years, until it became a perfect small image of an ancient windswept tree, a living sculpture capturing the grandeur of nature in something small enough to hold, is to picture the patient, loving artistry of this gentle Chinese craft, which could grow a whole majestic tree in miniature, tending it lovingly across the years, so that the vastness of nature might be held, small and perfect and living, in a single shallow dish. The Chinese believed that good fortune could be invited by careful, gentle living. Woven through Chinese life was a gentle belief that good fortune and happiness could be encouraged through careful, thoughtful living, through harmony in the home, respect for others and for nature, the keeping of festivals, and the small daily courtesies and good wishes that filled life with kindness and balance. Good fortune was thought to follow a well lived life. To imagine this gentle belief, the sense that happiness and good fortune were not merely matters of luck, but could be quietly invited through living well, through kindness and respect and harmony and the keeping of good customs, through filling one's days and home with balance and gentle good wishes, is to picture the hopeful and gentle spirit of Chinese life, which trusted that a life lived with care and kindness and harmony would draw good fortune to it, and so wove courtesy and balance and good wishing into the very fabric of every ordinary day. The Chinese language is full of gentle sayings and proverbs, distilled wisdom from long ago. The Chinese treasure a great wealth of proverbs and sayings, short and often poetic phrases that distill the wisdom and experience of thousands of years into a few memorable words, offering gentle guidance on how to live, work, and treat one another. These sayings are loved and quoted to this day. To imagine the great store of Chinese proverbs, each one a tiny crystal of wisdom, polished by long ages, offering in a few graceful words some gentle truth about patience, kindness, hard work, or the way of the world, quoted and treasured and passed down through the generations, is to picture the deep love of wisdom in Chinese culture, which gathered the experience of thousands of years into short and beautiful sayings, so that the hard-won understanding of the ancestors might be carried lightly forward, a whole philosophy folded into a handful of memorable words. A famous saying tells that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Among the most beloved of all Chinese sayings is the gentle wisdom that even a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step, a quiet reminder that the greatest tasks are accomplished not all at once, but by the patient taking of one small step after another. It is a saying of deep and gentle encouragement. To imagine the comfort in that simple ancient wisdom, that no goal is too distant to be reached if one simply begins and goes patiently on, that the longest journey is made of single steps and the greatest work of small daily efforts, that one need only take the first step and then the next, is to feel the gentle encouragement at the heart of so much Chinese wisdom, which understood that patience and steady small effort, more than haste or force, are what carry us at last across the longest of journeys. The Chinese deeply valued patience, knowing that great things take time. Patience was among the most treasured of Chinese virtues, for the Chinese understood deeply that the greatest and most beautiful things, a fine work of art, a wise character, a flourishing family, a great civilization, are not made quickly, but grow slowly over long time through patient and steady effort. They trusted in the slow ripening of things. Slow ripening. To imagine the deep Chinese trust in patience, the understanding that the loveliest and most lasting things cannot be rushed but must be allowed to grow slowly, like a tree or a wise old character, through long years of steady care, the willingness to work patiently toward distant goals, and to let things ripen in their own good time, is to picture one of the gentlest and wisest of Chinese values. A deep and restful patience that trusted in the slow growth of good things and found in unhurried, steady effort the surest path to beauty and wisdom and worth. The whole of Chinese civilization rested gently on the patient labor of its farmers. For all its emperors and inventions, its silk and porcelain and poetry, the whole great civilization of China rested in the end upon the patient labor of its countless farmers, who worked the fields and grew the rice and the grain that fed the millions in a quiet, unremembered toil that went on season after season for thousands of years. For the farmers were the true foundation of it all. To imagine those countless generations of Chinese farmers working their fields and flooded paddies through the turning seasons across thousands of years, their patient, unremembered labor quietly feeding the whole great civilization with its emperors and poets and palaces, is to picture the humble foundation beneath all the glory of China. The patient farmers whose steady work in the green fields, more than any emperor or invention, truly sustained the long life of the civilization, feeding it gently season after season through all the long ages. The Chinese saw their civilization as a great family, bound together across the ages, The Chinese felt their whole civilization to be, in a sense, one great family, bound together by shared ancestors, a shared written language, shared customs and stories and values, reaching back through thousands of years and forward to the generations yet to come, all part of one long, continuous line. This deep sense of belonging held the great civilization together. To imagine the Chinese sense of their civilization as one vast family, connected across thousands of years by the same writing and customs and reverence for the ancestors, each person a link in a long chain, reaching back into the deep past and on into the far future, all belonging to one continuous, unbroken whole, is to picture the deep source of China's long unity and endurance, a profound sense of belonging to one great family stretched across the ages, bound together by a shared inheritance, carried gently down the long generations. The wisdom of ancient China still gently guides and soothes the world today. The gentle wisdom of ancient China, its love of harmony and balance, its respect for nature and for elders, its patience and its proverbs, its calm philosophies of the middle way and of flowing like water, still speaks to people all over the world today, offering a quiet guidance as needed now as ever. The old wisdom has not faded. To imagine the gentle teachings of ancient China still soothing and guiding people across the world today, the calm wisdom of harmony and balance, of patience and kindness, of living gently and in tune with nature, still read and treasured and quietly followed by people far from China and long after the ancient sages, is to feel how the deepest wisdom does not age, but flows on like a gentle river across the centuries, the calm and balanced teachings of ancient China still offering, to our own restless age, a quiet and welcome peace. The whole spirit of ancient China can be felt in a single quiet garden at dusk. If we wish to hold the whole gentle spirit of ancient China in a single image, we might choose a classical garden at dusk, with its still pond and arching bridge, its strange, beautiful rocks and trailing willow, a pavilion where someone sits quietly drinking tea as the lanterns are lit and the moon rises over the curving rooftops. In that one scene is the whole of it. To imagine that quiet garden in the evening, the goldfish drifting in the still pond, the willow trailing in the water, the soft light of the lanterns and the rising moon, someone sitting peacefully with a cup of tea amid the beauty their people had perfected over thousands of years, is to hold the whole gentle spirit of ancient China in a single peaceful moment, its love of nature and beauty and calm, its patient art and its deep tranquility, all gathered into one quiet garden at dusk. And so, ancient China rests now, its long story flowing gently on beneath the moon. The great civilization of ancient China, with all its dynasties and emperors, its inventions and arts, its silk and porcelain and poetry, its patient farmers and wise sages, has flowed on through thousands of years and flows on still, while over its old gardens and mountains and rivers, the same gentle moon rises that lit its poets and its festivals so long ago. The ancient world rests and yet endures. To imagine that whole vast and gentle civilization at peace in the evening, its old palaces quiet, its gardens still, its lanterns glowing softly by the rivers, the same moon rising over the curving rooftops that has risen over China for thousands of years, the long, deep, patient story flowing gently onward into the night, is to feel the profound calm of a civilization so old and so enduring, and to sense, as we ourselves grow drowsy, that there is a deep and ancient peace in things that endure, flowing quietly on beneath the same eternal moon. And so, As our quiet journey through ancient China comes gently to its close, let us rest here in the garden as the lanterns glow and the moon climbs over the curving rooftops. Tonight we wandered along the Great Wall over misty mountains, through the golden halls of the Forbidden City, past the silent army of clay and the terraced fields of rice, through gardens of still ponds and trailing willows. We saw silk spun and tea poured, lanterns lit and dragons dancing softly through the old stories, and felt everywhere the deep Chinese love of harmony, patience, and gentle beauty. There is nothing left to carry now, and nothing left to do. When you are ready, another quiet journey is waiting on the screen, and you can simply let it carry on. A soft follow helps other tired minds find this calm place to rest as well. But for now, let your breathing slow, let your thoughts grow soft and dim, and let yourself drift down into sleep the way the last lantern light fades gently over a still garden pond at the end of a long and peaceful day. The old emperors are all at rest now beneath the quiet moon, and it is your turn to rest too. Rest well and sweet dreams.